So I'm going to just very briefly, because we don't have a lot of time, discuss the Biden plan, just certain aspects of it, because there's quite a lot of various dimensions. Some of them are highly technical. So I'm going to start by just offering a little context about why we're seeing plans like this, a little context about the shape of US accumulation, especially as it affects the ecological sphere, and then finally just comment on selected aspects of the Biden plan. So context. So why is it emerging in the way it's emerging? So it's emerging against the background of a certain level of political instability of the US and US capitalism, with some ongoing revolts domestically and abroad. But even more than that, it's emerging against two challenges, more than crises, I would say. The first is to find a way to restabilize ideologically and structurally the regime of US accumulation, and to reincorporate a downwardly mobile petty bourgeoisie and others, and to recuperate these classes into that have been kind of destroyed in large measure by neoliberalism. The second crisis, or the second challenge, is the need to do something about the environmental crisis, which I think is manifest. And the background is that this is emerging against rising systemic competition with China, which is slowly moving up the value chain, endogenizing value and technology, and above all, is well ahead of the US when it comes to clean energy production and technology and rollout. Now, when discussing these climate plans, we can focus on the minutia, but I think we actually have to focus on what is the US, because the US is already a climate plan, right? The US is already a regime of dealing with the climate and the broader environment. So I want to put forward a few points about what the US is, so that we don't forget it, because because what the US is what doesn't change unless we make it change. So the US, first of all, is sitting on top of a world system of polarized accumulation. When this comes to ecological issues, this means it's based on environmentally uneven exchange and militarized accumulation. And it's also based, of course, on settler colonial state formation. Because of that, or within that system, it's based on continuous, and we should agree, unfair use of world resources. This occurs both through absolute overuse, well beyond any possible carrying capacity, and it also occurs in a way that the US uses disproportionately more than other countries. So it uses much more than its fair share of atmospheric space for carbon dioxide, both in the present and historically, uses much more than a sustainable load of world resources. And of course, militarized accumulation has two faces, which relate to ecology. On the one hand, the military itself as one of the major world sources of carbon dioxide. And on the other, the US use of the military alongside sanctions to prevent other countries from carrying out national popular ecologically sound development. So those are kind of the background. Those are structural features of US accumulation as they relate to the environment. And unless we change them, then they don't change. So the Biden plan, first, we should note, only targets 50% reduction from 2005 levels by 2030. This in itself, again, will cause massive damage to a third world, which is already suffering disproportionately, again, from climate change, for example, the hurricanes hitting the Caribbean. What is the nature of the plan? The plan is essentially, and I'm quoting now, is aiming to ensure that the United States retains the union jobs integral to and involved in running and maintaining clean and zero emission fleets, while spurring the creation of union jobs in the manufacture of those new vehicles. Furthermore, the plan goes on to say, this nation needs millions of construction, manufacturing, engineering, and skilled trade workers to build a new American infrastructure and clean energy economy. So what does that mean, right? What does that mean concretely? What does that mean for the world? This means domestically, it means roping in labor unions into the green program, right? And it's worth keeping that in mind when people on the right-wing nationalist portion of what sometimes passes for the US left goes on about the novelty of the convergence of labor and ecology. In fact, Biden is already planning on doing that through corporatist labor unions. And he's going to plans at some level on setting in motion a new Apollo program. But what does that mean for the South? That means resources. Where do those resources come from? They come from Congo and Bolivia and elsewhere for low-cost metals and resource extractions. What is another aspect of it? The plan states supporting the most vulnerable to investing in nature-based solution while also discussing net zero climate goals. So what does that mean? It sounds good, but it's not good. Nature-based solutions essentially means turning the US countryside and above all the third world into carbon dioxide farms, probably through what is again now being widely proposed across the center, US center and the US Anglo left, including by figures like Kim Stanley Robinson, through these half-earth fortress conservation methods, which actually aim to cleanse people from the remainder of the planet. So again, these will have cataclysmic consequences on the third world. So what is not mentioned, right, in these plans? What are not mentioned at all are things like climate debt or dismantling the US military. Now, climate debt, of course, and this we can go back to the calls from the new international economic order, calling explicitly for resource transfers, and also calling for fair trade or calling for just prices on international commodity exchanges. And of course, this is also very visible in the Cochabamba People's Accords, calls for 6% of OECD and US GND to flow yearly to the South. Now, these are not currently on the agenda. These are not considered as gifts, and these are not considered as a form of charity to the third world. These are actually making do on both historical, current, and future damages that are resulting from the process of uneven accumulation, climate change, and unfair use of the world's CO2, carbon dioxide space. So again, the silence about that is in fact an aspect of overall uneven accumulation, and the silence about it is necessary for continued patterns of uneven accumulation. And in fact, if we want to undo US imperialism and the value flows that compose it, then we need to put things like climate debt and of course, dismantling of the US military and respect for national sovereignty on the agenda. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to it.